All right. So forget about 2022. It was okay. It was you know, more of a hell than the year before it, but it wasn't that bad. And, you'll get on with your life. And hey, what about some of them heavy metal records? Well, I've got one heavy metal record here, and the rest are just kind of weird other things, but check it out anyway. Here's a bunch of short reviews. Uh, so these are a little bit more casual. I'm not doing a deep dive on these. I listen to each one as usual. I previewed each one of these weeks in advance, usually upon receipt. I tag them with a system that I use. I won't go into everything, but each one of these has gotten at least roughly 5 full listens. And the stuff that I don't make it that far with, I just get rid of. So these are worth looking into, even if I skim over them. Uh, Now, Wathrosh and their first album, Odium, is literally just not my kind of thing. Now, it's a Greek black death metal band who have a very modern post metal influenced sound. And listening to this record, which is I think about 55 minutes or so, is a wall to wall, big production, very noisy, modern black metal album. And I think light on the actual black metal, there is some death metal influences in there too. The way I see it is if you love the bombast and um, all in attack of Behemoth, just as a general example, you'll appreciate what this band does, and you'll sync up with their always fully screaming, always fully blasting, everything all in all the time kind of sound. I prefer something a little bit more dynamic, and there is a dynamic here available, but I became numb to the experience quickly. I didn't find that the songs differentiated well. I found that there is some fine compositional work in here. I think they keep it rhythmically interesting. I think that the sound design is impressive for how it works through the loudness of it all. But when I sit down and I want music with a bit of meaning, I really don't want an hour of crank it up to 11 and just kind of give me a bunch of weird textures. So it didn't really stick with me, but I was impressed by it. There is some thought and a lot of cool intent going into this, but I think dropping a lot of the um, sort of overproduced aspects of it and introducing some interesting and personalized textures rather than texture packs or uh, you know guitar plugins and whatnot would really allow them to develop a personality beyond just this sort of wall-to-wall modern metal sound. Well, speaking of modern metal, I mean, Death Engine is literally a post-metal band with some post-hardcore and noise rock influences. And in this case, I actually like this record quite a bit. Uh, their earlier stuff was influenced by like chaotic hardcore and post-hardcore, and it was frantic, a little bit nutty. It was kind of a wacky group who were they still sounded serious and aggressive, and it was always a post-metal band. But now I think they've pretty much restaffed the band except for one guy, and this is the third full length from them, which changes their sound considerably. It's kind of like they're changing with the times, while also, it's post-punk a little bit, kind of a bit of dark wave in with their now major focus on more nuanced post-metal. And that'll be appealing to people who like atmospheric sludge metal and that kind of thing. Uh, it isn't exactly my kind of thing, but as far like I listen to post metal often enough to understand that this is a memorable and well made record. It's also one that has catchy songs in its in its wheelhouse, and they haven't lost the kind of the frantic punkish craziness of what they're able to do with unique sort of angular rhythms. Uh, I don't know if it's a record that will stick with me forever, but I think that the singles they put out are pretty cool, and it's worth checking out if you're open to listening to any post metal at all, or if you have an interest in the point where post hardcore and sludge metal meet, post metal basically. So we're checking out. Not a lot of people's thing. So Crom is a German heavy power metal band from a guy who he played on at least one Dark Fortress album, a pretty well known like melodic black metal band who they recently announced they were splitting up, and um, so I know that members of Dark Fortress played on the first album, but for I think since at least 2018 or however long it's been, they've kept a pretty steady trio lineup, and they play absolutely classic styled heavy power metal, and probably a little bit they ride the line perfectly between the like 90s too much over the top and 80s traditionalism. And I find that it's a good balance between like what would appeal to a Visigoth fan, which is quite over the top, but it kind of redeems, and stuff I kind of like, where like late 2000s tier, Tweer, or however you want to say it, where you get just before the progressive side of that band really took over, and they were going for more long form and elaborate epic pieces. They were a little bit more of a sing-songy classic band with a heaviness to them, and I think that applies here with Crom just a little bit. Uh, they also mention that they take quite a lot of influence from Manowar and Bathory, Corthon specifically, and I think that feeds into the attitude of the music more than anything. It is quite traditional heavy metal with um, a pretty memorable touch to their songwriting. So yeah, I mean, I found it was a memorable record and a very well made record that is again, it's probably over the top for a lot of people, but I'm really a fan of when a heavy metal band is not afraid to just be, you know, a heavy metal band and over the top like that. So it was cool. And there's too many songs in the album. It's an hour long. You could probably, I mean, if they had cut it off three quarters of the way through, it would have been plenty satisfying. Every song is memorable. Um, the what is it? There's a ballad here. I think it was In Your Eyes. I can't stand ballads in these types of records. It's just not my thing, and the singing isn't entirely consistent in the slower points. So the anthemic parts were where this band got me. The rest of it just kind of it hung around a little bit too long. But it was a pretty fun record. Surprisingly good compared to what I was kind of expecting when I first saw it. So uh, definitely we're checking out their discography and seeing if maybe one of their other records might fit better. But this one I thought was pretty good. Slog is a death doom metal band from the Southern California area, as far as I know, and it's between two musicians, Nicholas Turner and Jared Moran, who have played in a lot of different bands together. They have a lot of projects they are constantly working on. And so the thing with their work is that a lot of it kind of arrives as a sketch, as a demo level idea, and that might be a record, it might actually be a demo or an EP, and they never get it they never get it down the first time. And you're always going to want to like so far it's the second or third release from each project that really hits like a point of whether it's going to be cool or not, whether they're kind of like learning from what they did the last time. And in the case of Slog and Divination, they're onto something here, and they did do a great job with it. Now, up front, that album cover sucks. The logo I can live with, but it's just not. It's not great. I don't. You know what I mean? Just for this genre, I think it would. It's not important. So the big thing is that they're they've really improved on the second album, and if you're a fan of like Disembowelment or more recently like Eternal Altar and Bloodsoaked Necrovoid, there are things that you would like about this record. I don't think that they capitalize on the atmosphere they create very well. I think they could let every song breathe a little bit more and write less of them. Put, let the guitars ring out a little bit more. But otherwise, uh, they do a great job of keeping the death metal in Death Doom and making sure that, every moment kind of counts on the record. And it does. There's a couple. Up front, I was like, it felt aimless, none of it was sticking. But when I get to like Creeping Flora and later on Labyrinth Amulet, I was totally there with this band. Like, I get what they're doing. I like it. I think they need to continue refining it. I kind of wish they would just focus on like one or two groups and just make that their whole thing and just go all in on it. But anyone who can put out like 30 records a year and have them all be pretty much, you know, internet standard is pretty cool. So I definitely want to hear more from Slog. It's one of a few projects they put out that I think they should focus on. And yeah, death doom metal fans who want something a little bit referential of classics will appreciate that record. Yeah. Nachtmare is a project from Snudert, uh, who was in a blackened sludge metal act, Clued. And so that band I was familiar with because they're on Consoling Sounds, and they they sort of mix folklore ideas with a form of blackened sludge metal that is not so typical. It's very atmospheric. It's a really interesting band, and so he's sort of taken uh, a different approach to this, which is more influenced by early 90s, or well, let's just say second wave black metal, which most people, when they say that, they mean 94 to 96, maybe 98. And all that really affects is the use of keyboards. There is a little bit of like a what I would consider like a limbic art sheen to all of it, without the brutality of that era. A lot of this is atmospheric black metal that wanders on its to its own kind of vibe. And I think if the intention is to make is to tell stories within like a nightmarish foil, he's done a great job. I think that it is often not so much a maze like, but uh, hypnotic and not always so much heavy or riff oriented, but it leads you down a path and tells you a story in a language you probably don't understand. So I enjoyed it, but I didn't come back for it because I just felt like the songs were a bit too long and none of it really stuck for me. And yeah, it just needed riffs. I think that it just needed something to really catch the ear and keep me coming back to it because there was nothing else that was all that unique about the atmosphere created. Yeah, I won't talk too much about this one. This is a split 12-inch between uh, Manchester-based band Dead Sea Apes. This is an improvised session, I believe, which was part of a pandemic era lockdown session, I believe. And it's a 20-minute jam that is, well, let's not call it a jam. Let's call it a drone. And it's a good one that you might want to be intoxicated while you listen to, or just chilling out and willing to let your mind wander, because you'll benefit from that while the song is playing, because it is a set of four notes repeated over and over for 20 minutes. I like that kind of thing. I think psychedelic drone is awesome, and I do prefer what the band whose name is a symbol does, which is a a improvised psychedelic rock jam band who touch upon a lot of different, what I would consider late 70s influenced music, which might be everything from krautrock to uh, what not elsewhere. And this song, it has a groove. It's again, it's another 20-minute song. It's side B, and I think this is why I would buy the record is for their side. I didn't know much about this band. I definitely liked Dead Sea Apes' previous record, um, but this record was all about the band whose name is a symbol, and I like how that groove that starts. It's motoric. It's briskly paced, and it continues to evolve over the course of the full 20 minutes, and it's engaging throughout. Yeah, your mind kind of will start to wander after about 10 minutes if you're anything like me, but it's worth following along, and it's a pretty cool record. Um, and then finally, Belu Nimai and Alkai. I kind of jumped the gun and talked about this one earlier because I didn't have enough records to talk about. But this is a neo-folk and ritual ambient project who really capitalized on um, their electronic music influences on this record. It does at times feel like a beat record, and they mention like Dead Can Dance and some Sigur Rós as influences, and I think that you can tell as you sit through it. But they've generally stuck with about 3 to 4 minute pieces which are ritualistic in nature and center around a sort of often lively or livelier than you would think electronic beat. And it's a unique record. It's definitely worth sitting with and appreciating for not only the different textures that they introduce into each song and the traditional instrumentation, but how that sort of works with the electronic beats and that side of the band, which is it's a different type of neo folk. It's not exactly industrial, but there is that ritual ambiance to it that is. I thought it was pretty cool. So that's worth checking out later in the month. So yeah, just 7 records this time. I'll pick up on more things next time, but for now, that's just stuff coming up in January. It's worth at least giving a try. That I won't give a full review to. So much more to read on the actual article. So there you go.